Welcome, periods.
You should move left and right.
Well, what's your problem?
Because like it has a stereo mic, so when you say 7, you should move left and right.
Good.
Welcome,
period 7. You are going to get this video posted at like 4 p.m. saying you're going to watch it by tomorrow. All right. What does our set theory look like? We have all these sets, man, so far. Two sets of the same, if they have the same members, the empty set exists, we can make unordered pairs, we can union, we can construct a subset of a set given some property from another set that we've already constructed, we can take the power set of a set. With these axioms, we can create finite sets. I want to be careful about this. These axioms are powerful enough to take the empty set and just keep adding to it and taking the power set and taking the power set and unioning and power setting and unioning, etc. So we can only make finite sets with these axioms. In particular, we can make an infinite number of sets, each of which is finite. Someone agree? That seems intuitively clear. Okay, so we need more axioms because we also need infinite sets. If you are the kind of people who are following Zermelo Fraenkel's axioms, you are trying to reconstruct the full power of like Cantorian mathematics, just without the paradoxes. So you want all the goodies, like ordinals and stuff like that, right? And if you're going to make ordinals, you need some infinity. So let's define a new operation, the successor operation, which has its old definition of successor. The successor of a number is just x union that number. And now we can see how we can construct the naturals / ordinals using the axioms of set theory we've seen so far. 0 is just the empty set. 1 is just the successor of 0, which is 0 union the set containing 0, which is the empty set union the set containing 0, so it's just the set containing 0. And then etc., etc. This is like review, right? 2 is just the successor of 1, so it's 1 union. And all of these operations that I'm performing are operations that I have the power to perform via the ZFC axioms. And we get a boom, boom, and this goes on forever. And in general, n is just the successor of n minus 1. Okay, but I also need omega. I want omega. And I have no ability to construct the set omega yet. So I need to be able to make the set omega. Okay, skipping over a lot of the details, we have a new axiom. This new axiom is called the axiom of infinity. And loosely speaking it says, well, okay, let's read it. It says, okay, define a set as inductive if it has 0, and whenever it has a number in it, it has the number's successor. Okay, so intuitively, an inductive set, the naturals would be an example of an inductive set, because they have 0, and whenever they have the number, they have the next one. But also the naturals, plus some monsters, would also be an inductive set, right? So essentially an inductive set is any set which, when it has a number, it has that number's successor. And then a very high-level proof ensues, which I'm skipping, in which one proves that there is a smallest inductive set, and one defines that inductive set to be omega. Or one defines omega to be that smallest inductive set. There's like a minimal set which is inductive. And what the axiom of infinity does specifically is it asserts the existence of a set which both has the empty set in it, and whenever it has something in it, it has the successor in it. Get it? So I sort of give myself this ability to create these infinite sets. And then using the axioms so far, we can show that there is at least one, that least one is omega. Okay, this is pretty much where, so using these axioms, we can essentially construct the entire natural numbers. This is the von Neumann construction. Yes?
Are we sure we won't get a loop like S of 1 is 2, S of 2 is 1?
Yeah, I think we are pretty sure, because based on the definition of successor, I think that just can't be, right?
Yeah, how do we prove our sets don't loop, I guess?
Wait, but stop, it's not saying for any successor. It's not a model, it's that successor, that specific.
Yeah, I'm specifically defining the successor operation as a set operation.
And that certainly.
Yeah. Okay, so we now have suddenly we kind of did it, right? The goal was for set theory to be strong enough to be able to be able to represent all the axioms of piano arithmetic, and we just have. So you can prove every one of the piano axioms. You can prove holds in ZFC. It all just kind of works out. In other words, if these set theory axioms do what they're supposed to do, then I have proven sort of piano arithmetic from these set theory axioms. And what are the set theory what are the piano axioms? Well, that there's a number 0. Okay, of course there is, because we have an axiom that says it. And then every number has a successor. It all just works out. All right. Blah, 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 blah. Oh, this is the proof. No, we're not doing it right now. This is the proof that, basically this is the proof of induction from our definition of omega. Check it out later. It all works out. You can construct addition, you can construct multiplication, and now every sort of arithmetic operation is really just a set theoretic operation. And you can just verify that all the rules of arithmetic work, and they're all just theorems that can be proven. Alright, this is kind of where Zermelo stops, although this is even sort of better. We gave the cleaned up version of everything that Zermelo did. It's later on when Frankel, I said this on Friday, Frankel rephrases all the axioms in first order logic, clarifies what a predicate is. He also finds that there are some things that you might want that you can't do in Zermelo's original axioms. And so Frankel adds in some very difficult to understand axioms, which we're going to skip through kind of quickly, such as the axiom of replacement. The axiom of replacement, I've spent hours of my life trying to understand this axiom. It's really hard. And it basically very, very roughly speaking says that if you can define a function, and if you have a set, then you have the set of images of that function. But the details are more complicated. And there are some obscure sets, not of interest to the average mathematician, but of interest to some people who are interested in them, of some advanced sets which require the axiom of foundation to prove. For example, if you want the set, this is a typo, I fixed it, but then I left my flash drive at home, so this is the Google version. If, let's just say, this happens every day, that you want the set omega, omega plus 1, omega plus 2, etc. It's not actually omega times 2. It's just its own weird thing. I personally have never had a need for that set. But let's say you want that set. It can be shown that you cannot construct that set using the previous axioms, but with the axiom of foundation, with the axiom of replacement, you can. Okay. Then there is another axiom, which is the axiom of choice, which you now know about. What's wrong?
This is the bad axiom.
This is the axiom that some people don't like and some people love it. So the axiom of choice came up over the weekend presentation, but most mainstream mathematicians are in support of the axiom of choice. And so I think I said this last class, but maybe you didn't understand what I was talking about. The reason why it's called ZFC is because it stands for Zermelo-Frankel with choice. So when people say ZFC, they're explicitly including the axiom of choice in their axiomization. If you don't like the axiom of choice, then you take it out and you use just ZF. Alright, so good, this is a good place to stop. We could have gone into a lot more technical detail on various points, and I even skipped an entire axiom, the axiom of foundation, so I'm really glad I skipped it because it's really weird. But basically, this axiomization of set theory, it basically works. And what I mean by works, what I mean is every intuitive set theoretic operation, construction, argument, etc. that had been used into the 19th century has now been formalized. And the precise power that sets are allowed to have has been sort of explicitly mentioned and delineated. In other words, we axiomatized this branch of mathematics. Secondly, we have given our axioms enough power that they can do all the things that we need set theory to do. Set theory serves as a foundational role in mathematics, even up to now, even in 2019. In principle, all mathematical theories can be stated in terms of just set theory. And really down to the level of just ZFC. All mathematical arguments are really just long Fitch-style proofs in ZFC with many, many, many defined constructs. This is at least one interpretation. What some current mathematicians
You
would
get
say.
more information with CFC though.
When you get more information, you mean like that numbers actually are sets versus like something
Right.
else.
Like 3 is an element of 4 is not true
Yes,
of numbers.
yes. Eli doesn't like that when you're just doing arithmetic, like 3 plus 4 equals 7. That's like a fact that you want. So check, good. But what he doesn't like is that if you represent 3 as a set and you represent 4 as a set, and you represent addition as a function which is a set, then he has a philosophical objection. You still get a theorem that is, when interpreted correctly, says 3 plus 4 equals 7, but he thinks that that's like too much or something, because really 3 plus 4 equals 7 shouldn't be about set theory, it should just be about numbers.
Set theory should just be a model of arithmetic.
He thinks set theory should just be a model of arithmetic. That's a slightly different position. But okay, but at least every statement of mathematics can be written in the language of set theory, at least. The other part of what we were trying to do was we were trying to avoid paradoxes. So have we?
We have to prove that it's
Maybe we have. It feels like we have. It feels like we avoided the paradoxes, or at least we avoided the one paradox that we were aware of, which was Russell's paradox. But truly, for the skeptical, we cannot stop until we have shown that the axioms of ZFC are consistent. That sounds really hard. Why does that sound so hard to prove that the axioms of ZFC are consistent? A high-level question. Okay. Wait. Before anyone answers, just imagine, how have we in the past ever shown that something was consistent?
Relative.
We would make a model, right?
Yeah.
What does a model of ZFC look like?
has to be something lower than ZFC. Like the world is consistent.
Right, you see the problem? Set theory is already at the very, very bottom. Everything has been reduced down to more simple mathematical objects until we get to the very, very bottom. At the very, very bottom is set theory. So if I now have axioms of set theory, because I was forced to axiomatize this branch of mathematics instead of keeping it intuitive because of Russell's paradox, and maybe we would have tried to do that anyway, then now we seem to have run out of mathematical objects. I cannot even imagine what a model of ZFC would look like. It would have to be some kind of even more abstract thing. Something, yeah, pure logic. Okay, well now you're just being Russell, basically, right? This is what led him to kind of pursue this, because we've run out, right? Okay, so so this is a sort of a partial success, at least as of 1925. We have an axiomatization of set theory, but we don't know if it's consistent, and until it's consistent, we can't truly rest, say some people. Yo.
Wait, and then the other option is like, if set theory can demonstrate its own consistency.
Somehow,
Right,
whatever that means.
right.
Okay, good. All right. So, what do we have? Half an hour? 35 minutes. All right. Good, we can do this. All right. David Hilbert. This is a presentation from last year. It's David Hilbert. This is such a great picture. He is exactly the guy for this job. He is not going to rest until mathematics has been axiomatized and axiomatized correctly. And correctly to him means that it has been axiomatized according to these meta-mathematical objectives that he sets for himself. And this is what we're going to review. All right, so what's up with David Hilbert, the person? Born in Prussia, in German-speaking region of Prussia. He went to the University of Königsberg. We may have said all this already. He went to Göttingen. Göttingen becomes, basically because Hilbert is there, the #1 university in Germany, and Germany is the #1 country for studying math, right up through the 30s, or through the mid-30s. He had tons of students who became really famous. The thing about Hilbert is, he, unlike the intuitionists, unlike Frege certainly, he was like very powerful, sociologically like powerful or whatever. Like he spoke very forcefully. When he did things, people like listened. He like got a lot of people working under them. And there's this whole team of mathematicians, and basically he made this whole place where all the top people in the world wanted to go, and they all did come, and they all came, and whatever Hilbert said to do, they did it. And so his influence on the first third of the 20th century of mathematics was huge. He was not just a guy writing like the script like home in his house, like, you know, screaming at his wife about cookies and stuff. He was like really out there. Okay, and we're going to talk about this. So this is a review. We had a whole other previous presentation, Hilbert's Foundations of Geometry. He published this in 1899. This was like the last really, he takes on this task of axiomatizing Euclidean geometry, and he basically just does it. And you will recall that he takes a very strong position on undefined terms as being essential for mathematics, and in fact we can't define them, we can't even know what they are. The actual objects do not matter, only the relationships matter. He axiomatizes it, and everything is great. 2 years later, I think this is it 1900 or 1901? In 1900, there is a International Congress of Mathematicians in Paris in 1900. And everyone's caught up in this sort of feeling of excitement. There's all kinds of new inventions, technology, you know, whatever, telephones, steam engine, cool thing, elevators, and other exciting things like that are all happening in the what's up?
Communism, invented around that time.
Communism, all the things like communism and elevators. Basically, the future is now. And so this is big part of chapter 3 of Logic Comics. This is toward the end. This is where I stopped reading last class. They all, the basically top people in the world, all come, and Hilbert got some things to say. He gives a speech. This famous speech, this speech about the 23 unsolved problems of mathematics. There's a whole backstory which I can't remember exactly the details of. I think they offered him like a slot as like the headline speaker or whatever, and then he like didn't have his presentation ready in time, so he like had to back out, and he eventually gave his presentation to like a small room full of like not that many people and like some like in some other weird time slot about something totally unrelated, and this only became popular like later. So the dramatization in Logic Comics is not very accurate. In fact, all those people I think like weren't there. Like I think Bertrand Russell like wasn't in the room when this was happening. He like left halfway through the conference and like went home. But anyway, let's take the sort of what's it called? Very like romantic view of things. Hilbert comes to Paris. And he gives a talk in a grand ballroom with tens of thousands of people, and they're all listening and hanging in every word. And he says, "Who of us would not be glad to lift the veil behind which the future lies hidden, to cast a glance at the next advances of our science and at the secrets of its development during future centuries? What particular goals will there be towards which the leading mathematical spirits of coming generations will strive? What new methods and new facts in the wide and rich field of mathematical thought will the new centuries disclose?" Okay, and then he says, "I got 23 problems for you." And what he says is, these are, in my opinion, shut up, I'm David Hilbert, I got this. These are the problems that I feel that should be the most important problems for the next century. And by and large, this was a very forward-looking list. It was a list in which he ended up being sort of right in that these problems were the problems that tended to dominate at least the first 30 or 40 years of the 20th century. But this was also a somewhat idiosyncratic list in that he was obsessed with the things on the kind of cutting edge of mathematical rigor and mathematical abstraction at that time. And in Logic Comics, they there's this whole hilarious section in which the author of Logic Comics sort of envisions the audience as being sort of broken down into the Germans who are all following Weierstrass, obsessed with like rigor and want all mathematics to be formalized, and then there are like the French mathematicians who are following Poincaré and want to do everything intuitively and think rigor is like sort of silly. This is kind of a caricature, but it is a cartoon after all. It is certainly true that not all mathematicians, even in 1900, are following like the latest, explorations into like ordinals and stuff like that. But Hilbert says, no, you should. In fact, I think his number one problem, the problem he leads the list off with, is kind of like an FU to anyone who's like not taking Cantor seriously. He claims that the very number one problem that should dominate the 20th century is the continuum hypothesis, which is like not a traditional mathematical theorem at all. It's like this very obscure, you might say, abstract and sort of like not particularly applicable to like at least traditional things like physics. Is there a set whose size is in between that of the natural numbers and the real numbers? Number 2, the compatibility of the arithmetic axioms. In other words, a proof that the axioms of piano arithmetic are consistent. That's his number 2 problem. This is pre-Russell's paradox, by the way. So he's obsessing over consistency in the second of his thing, something that most other people are not working on. Okay, some weird geometry things. Problem of the straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points. Okay. Stuff about groups, things that are way over my head. Oh, hey, by the way, can you just like axiomatize physics? Thanks. Get back to me when you're done. There are certain numbers which he really wants to know whether they're transcendental or not, like pi and e. I think pi and e were done by then, but like pi to the e to the pi, which I mentioned, have still not been solved. The Riemann hypothesis. Okay, great. Don't know that much about that, so I'm going to leave that off. There's a couple slides coming on it. Other things. Diophantine equation. This is kind of relevant to us. What's the Diophantine equation? Has this come up in this class yet?
No.
Yeah. No, wait, yeah.
Oh, maybe
No.
it did. It's an equation like of the form like 4x squared minus xy cubed equals 2.
Wait, yeah, that's why Diophantus was a choice on our first line.
I thought so. I thought it may have come up extremely briefly. Anyway, I'll re-mention it now. This is a Diophantine equation. Is an equation which is a polynomial in a certain number of variables, and whose only and what we seek are solutions which are integers. So, do you see any solutions which are integers here? I don't. Good. Okay, so does this equation have integer solutions? I have no idea. But is there some general method for solving any Diophantine equation? This is what he was looking for. And in fact, what he wants is an algorithm which will tell you for sure whether a given Diophantine equation has solutions and how to find what those solutions are. It seems like there should be one, because after all, what could be more simple than just like sums and products of like integers, right? So, okay. There was none at that time. He thought that was really important. Okay, other things, blah, blah, 7th degree equation, something, something, something. A lot of stuff is like totally over my head. Building up space from congruent polyhedra. That sounds exciting.
That one was
okay.
solved, I think.
Some years we have spent like hours like going through this list one at a time and pulling up the Wikipedia page and like looking at them and stuff. But I don't think should we do it anyway for just like 1 minute?
Well, I'm looking at Wikipedia, so most of these are either resolved or
What is the color code?
the color green means
Okay.
resolved.
Good. Yeah, so here's the chart. And what happened is, by and large, people got to work on these problems like right away. And if you solved one of Hilbert's 23 problems, you're just instantly famous and amazing. And here are the problems, and here's this chart Wikipedia goes through and says, okay, some of this I don't want to talk about because it ruins, believe it or not, there's more things coming. But first problem, continuum hypothesis.
Too much exposed.
Sorry. Second problem.
Too much exposed.
Third problem, resolved. Answer, no. Then fourth problem, too vague to be determined. Sorry, Hilbert, please do better. Continuous groups, something, something, resolved-ish. Axiomatized physics, partially resolved. Okay. Then is A to the B transcendental? Resolved, yes. Good. The Riemann hypothesis, unresolved. And then et cetera, et cetera. So as you can see, like, I don't know, about a third of them have been solved. Some have been declared too vague to be solved, and some are still just unresolved. Yeah, I mean, this really ended up being like a pretty good guess about what was going to happen for mathematics, at least for a couple decades. Cool?
Cool.
Okay,
That's
when you can like check out that list more carefully. All right, continuing. How do I make it go not looking like this? Yeah. Woo. All right. In particular, Hilbert problem number 2. This is a quote from his paper. Above all, I wish to designate the following as the most important among the numerous questions which can be asked with regards to axioms, to prove that they are not contradictory. That is, that a definite number of logical steps based upon them can never lead to contradictory results. A direct method is needed for the proof of the compatibility of the arithmetical axioms. Guys, this is Hilbert in 1900, obsessing over the consistency of the axioms of piano arithmetic, when almost no other working mathematician is really obsessing over this. Do you see how he has placed meta-mathematics in its primary role in mathematics? He's basically, his first two problems are the continuum hypothesis about the existence of sort of sets of infinite size, and basically showing this is effectively a meta-mathematical result that he wants. This is before Russell's paradox. Do you see how, like, after Russell's paradox, people might have suddenly turned to Hilbert as, like, the savior? He was the one guy out there. He's not the only guy, but he was the main guy who was obsessing over the need to prove your axioms consistent. Okay, the Riemann hypothesis. We could spend 1 minute talking about this or an hour. Conveniently, we only have 1 minute because I don't really understand this. Oftentimes I've just yielded the floor to like Stav or whatever to like just talk about it, but we don't really have any time. It's really important. It has to do with the distribution of prime numbers. It's phrased as a fact about complex numbers. See some people who think they know things. If you want more information about this, there are also some great videos on YouTube about it, and also blah 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 blah. Hilbert says, if I were to awaken after having slept for 1,000 years, my first question would be, has the Riemann hypothesis been proven? And the answer is no, it has not been proven. And it is still generally considered the most important unproved sort of conjecture in mathematics. Important in the sense that if it's true, then it has ramifications in like many different branches of mathematics at like a somewhat deep level. But this is all, I'm not the authority on this at all. Okay, so good. Remember this video on the rigor day? Yeah. Good. Okay, so Hilbert establishes something which is eventually referred to as Hilbert's program. And Hilbert's program is, hey, all the top mathematicians in the world, come to Göttingen, and we're going to fix everything. All right, well, what are we going to do in Göttingen? Hilbert? Well, first of all, before you can get in the door, you have to sign my contract that says you are a formalist. And what is a formalist? It is Hilbert's philosophy of metamathematics, which we discussed, I think, pretty well like 2 weeks ago, but let's say it again. And this is a little bit of a caricature. It's unclear whether Hilbert really believes this is kind of a straw man to some extent, but formalism is, okay, it's an approach to finding, we want a rigorous foundation for all of mathematics. No intuition should be required to do mathematical proofs. Maybe intuition is required to construct them, but no intuition should be required to follow them. Every step of the proof should be an obvious consequence from the previous one, and we shouldn't even have to understand the math anymore. Every proof should be easy to explain to someone, even if they don't know anything about the topic, just by going through the logic. And good. All right. Also, post Frege, it was seen and understood and agreed upon that even the logic itself should be formalized. So by about 1905, mainly because of the work of Bertrand Russell and piano, they convinced the rest of the working mathematicians in the world who care about these kinds of things to switch over to stating their axioms in first-order logic. And not only should these axioms be stated in first-order logic, but first-order logic itself needs to be axiomatized as a formal system which has a character-by-character, like unambiguous expression. And if you accept this understanding of mathematics, then mathematics is really just a list of axioms and a list of proofs of those axioms. And these proofs are finite syntactic objects. In other words, every theorem, every axiom is just a string of symbols. Every theorem is a string of symbols. And every proof is also a very, very long string of symbols, each line of which is valid according to the rules of logic. This is Hilbert's approach to mathematics. And of course, a proof has to be finite because that's built into sort of what a proof is. And every proof should in principle be checkable by a computer. Okay. All right. And so, under this formalist viewpoint, if you asked Hilbert, what is mathematics? And he was being really aggressive that day. Here's what he might say. Math is about picking axioms and showing that all the theorems that follow from those axioms indeed do follow. And you might even say that since the objects of mathematics are impossible to know, because all we have are the axioms, and every axiomization must have undefined terms, and so we never really know even what the objects of mathematics are. You might even say that the objects of mathematics are the symbols themselves, or something like that. And according to this formalist view, this is a bit of a caricature of the formalist view, but they do kind of believe this, some of them. Math is just like this game in which we are moving sort of marks around on a piece of paper. This is the end result now of our sort of centuries of rigor. And math now is just Euclidean geometry, for example. It's a game. You give me some axioms, and I use these axioms, which are just strings, and I play this game called Fitch-style proofs, and what that game does is it produces new strings. And that's called doing geometry, okay? That's, if you're an ultra-formalist, that's what you believe mathematics is. Mathematics is a game of cranking out theorems based on other theorems, okay? And what are the objects of mathematics to a formalist? It is irrelevant. You cannot ask that question, and if you do ask it, I refuse to answer it. Objects must merely satisfy axioms, and any object which satisfies the axioms works just as well. And so we never really know what objects we're talking about. Are the axioms true? Again, Hilbert would say, foolish question. You cannot ask that question, I will not answer it. All we can do is come up with our axioms, and we can sort of, you could think they're true, but there's no way to prove they're true. Okay, and what is even truth? I don't even know. Right? We don't have truth anymore. All we have are axioms and theorems, and if you prefer to think of the axioms as being true, you can. But I can't argue that to you that those axioms are true, because I don't even know what objects there are that I'm talking about with these axioms. All right, it's kind of a little bit crazy. Do you agree? This is like where rigor takes you if you go all the way. All right, and just to contrast this with the other philosophies of mathematics, there is the logicist philosophy of mathematics. What's up? Because
There's no intuition in philosophy.
yeah, I think we could just get rid of that yin yang entirely. But anyway, math. So the logicists believe that math is entirely reducible to logic, and that math is really just kind of one giant sort of tautology that sort of springs from the laws of thought alone. And intuitionism, this sort of radically different view of what mathematics is that it's a human activity, a fundamentally human activity, a human mental activity. And, okay. And so this is Laura Espinosa made this slide, it's pretty nice. So this is like, again, kind of dumbing it down here a little bit. Let's read these. Let's see, who's who? The person on the left says, from our perspective, the truth of a mathematical statement is a subjective claim corresponding to a mental construction. An object with certain properties exists only if an object with these properties can be mentally constructed. Who's that?
The intuitionist.
That's the intuitionist. How about this person in the middle? No. That's incorrect. An object exists only if its existence can be derived from pure logic. You see, mathematics as a whole is actually just logic. Who is that? That's the logicist. And on the right, this girl with the nice, what's that thing called? Bun, is saying... But it goes like up. Isn't there a special name for that?
High ponytail.
A high pony. That's like a thing, right? A high ponytail. She says, mathematics is essentially a set of rules for manipulating